Hi, I'm Margaret Bickman, one of the board members and volunteers for KMRE 88.3 Radio. Today, I'm talking with Mitchell Kahn, who's Artistic Director of the Pacific Northwest Opera. Mitchell, it's great to have you on Pledge Drive weekend. There may be some people in Whatcom and even Skagit and even Snohomish County who have not heard of Pacific Northwest Opera. So what is Pacific Northwest Opera doing in our community?
Well, first of all, Pacific Northwest Opera started as Skagit Opera in 2003, and we sort of straddle Skagit and Whatcom County because I live up here in Bellingham. Most of our patrons live in Bellingham, but we perform in McIntyre Hall down in Mount Vernon because, for those of you who haven't been to it, it's just an absolutely beautiful facility and a beautiful venue and a perfect venue for opera. So Pacific Northwest Opera actually does extend much beyond Skagit County. And in fact, I changed the name about 6 or 7 years ago because we've been very fortunate in finding really good young singers, some of whom have gone on to have major careers and sing at places like the Metropolitan Opera. And one such singer went there, and in his bio in the Metropolitan Opera program book, he did list Skagit Opera. And I called him and said, John, how come you didn't put Skagit Opera in the program, in your bio in the program? And he said, well, whoever heard of Skagit? And I said, okay, we got to spread our name a little bigger. And also we have people on the board at that time came everywhere from Blaine all the way down to Everett. So much bigger than just Skagit. And of course, since then, we've really quite a bit expanded. Many of our singers come from literally all over the country to come and sing with us.
So tell us some of the productions you've done that have drawn people to your audiences in McIntyre Hall.
Well, for example, right after the pandemic, we did La Traviata, a very popular opera. That production now has over 240,000 views on YouTube. And our production of Otello and Rosenkavalier are two operas those are in 2003, 2004 season. No, 2002, 2022, 23 season. Drew audiences from Portland to Vancouver, BC, and even as far as San Francisco, because they're operas that have not been done on the West Coast for a long time. And in fact, when we did our one evening reduction of Wagner's opera, The Ring of the Nibelung, people came from San Francisco and from Los Angeles. And in fact, the San Francisco Wagner Society sent us a donation to help support our efforts. So much larger than just our local community. On the other hand, we really focus on trying to bring opera to a community that doesn't really have a lot of exposure to classical singing and classical unamplified acoustic singing. And I think that young people particularly don't get exposed the way we did when we were younger to opera singers. And when I was growing up, there were opera singers on the Muppets and there were opera singers on late night TV, and everybody heard that kind of sound. And now young people don't get to hear that sound very often. And I think that they're so used to hearing things that are amplified, for example, and they often confuse loudness with intensity. And of course, every instrumental musician is always taught to try to get a singing tone. Because why? Because it's the sound of the human voice that is the one that has the most emotional content.
And your singers are not mic'd, right?
No, nothing is mic'd. In fact, the first opera I did as general director back in 2011, someone said to me, well, the amplification's turned up too high. And I said, you don't understand. Yeah, there's no amplification. Those are people who are trained to fill a large space with their emotions and their voices.
Yeah.
And that's what opera is about.
Yeah. So in the old days, there have been opera programs on radio, right? You remember some of those?
Oh, the Metropolitan Opera Texaco broadcast or something I grew up listening to for sure.
Yeah.
So, maybe KMRE can start an opera program.
That would be really cool.
Because one of the things that has happened is that because people are not used to listening to it, they think it's strange, this opera stuff. It's written in a foreign language sometimes, and it's, but you have to think that opera, which comes from the Italian, literally means a work of art. It's an opera. A opera is a work of art. So music videos are simply very short operas. Okay. And if we didn't have opera, we wouldn't have music videos. It's with song and dance and costumes and, and the setting and all those things go into producing an opera exactly like a music video. So we have to kind of get people over their reluctance to try something that's a little different. And that's been one of our biggest challenges. How do you get especially younger people, to overcome this sort of idea that opera is like spinach, it's like good for you. But in fact, it's really dessert.
Uh-huh.
And so one of the messages that I would hope that we get out into our local community, and we try to give opportunities to go out into schools to get people, especially kids, exposed to, I don't say exposed like to a virus, but more like get introduced to this kind of vocal sound of the trained, the professionally trained voices. And our opera singers are very high quality. And Margaret, you've come to our productions, and you know that whether it's I either know what I'm doing or I'm very lucky, but I've been able to find an incredible number of very good young singers, many who have gone on to professional careers. And because of the contacts I've made over the years, I'm able to bring in singers literally from around the country and of very high caliber. So people get a chance to actually hear what excellence sounds like.
Yeah.
And one of my sort of big tragedies, the last opera we just did, which was Mozart's Abduction from the Seraglio, which has a bit of a problem because of its title. It sounds better in German. But we did very well at the box office. People came, they all loved it. But we didn't sell enough tickets to students, and we only charged $10 for student tickets. And the idea that we only sold something like 13 student tickets is a real tragedy. And so I reached out to the choral teachers around in both Whatcom and Skagit County to try to encourage their students to come and hear really high quality singing, what singing should sound like, what a trained singer can produce, as it were.
Well, I think that's one reason community radio is important, and why I've interviewed you several times on my Arts and Entertainment Spotlight for KMRE. Very important to get the word out about opera.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that, what it always surprises me, given how much effort and money we put into getting the word out, how people don't even know we exist.
That's right. That's right.
And that's sort of always surprising. So I'm grateful to KMRE and its contribution to keeping music alive in Whatcom County and in Skagit County.
That's so great. Thank you, Mitch. I've been talking with Mitchell Kahn, Artistic Director of Pacific Northwest Opera. Before we get back to our regular programming, I want to remind all of our listeners to call 360-398-6150 and donate what you can. Any amount helps support local, all-volunteer community radio, or go to kmre.org. Thanks. Next coming up, you will hear Bliss is Ordinary, hosted by Yanni and Jesse.